Hey everybody, this is Daniel Goldhorn of Daniel Goldhorn, the YouTube channel, and I'm here with my friend Reynard.
Hey Dan, how's it going?
That was pretty good. So, Reynard, he has a Tumblr blog called Sloshed Cinema, and we've been friends for a few years now. You might actually know him from, I did a review of The Last Airbender a couple years ago, and he appeared in that because I wanted to get his perspective. He hadn't seen the show before, and he really made that video special. And it was actually really funny that the first appearance he had on my channel was for an M. Night Shyamalan movie, probably his most infamous movie. And then we're starting off this channel with his newest picture, Knock at the Cabin.
I was about to say this is just kind of torture for me, but it's all good.
Hey, you know what? It's for the algorithm. Besides, this one wasn't as much torture. It's like so Knock at the Cabin was based off of a book called The Cabin at the End of the World, and the premise of it is that it's this family, two dads and their daughter, and they face this home invasion from four people who come in. They're claiming that the apocalypse is going to happen unless someone in the family sacrifices himself. And really, that's kind of like the main focus of the movie. Like, it's not super complicated, and just seeing how everything unfolds is the main driving force of the film. So, now, kind of start off with, what were your thoughts of Knock at the Cabin?
I guess just like coming in hot, like when I was watching the movie, I was kind of trying to do the math. Like Shyamalan always has his twists, or 9 times out of 10 has his twists and whatnot, and the trailers had pretty much kind of shown the hand. Like, it was like, oh, this is unambiguously like an apocalypse movie, essentially, right? And I was like, okay, well, is this actually going to be one? Like, is there going to be some extra layer that's coming in? It was just kind of surprising, I guess, how straightforward it was in that regard.
Yeah, I feel like the marketing kind of did this movie dirty, because I feel like because watching it, like, if I try to filter out the trailers, I feel like the twist of the movie was supposed to be that, oh, the apocalypse is real, because a lot of the movie in like the first 2 acts is, the dads, Eric and Andrew, they're trying to be like, no, this isn't real, this is just, because, the first 2 plagues that are unleashed in this apocalypse, it was like a tsunami, and the earthquake for that happened hours beforehand, and then there's a plague, and it's like, oh, we heard about the plague a long time ago, like, this is nothing new. So I feel like that was supposed to be the twist, and then the trailers just kind of showed it. Plus, I feel like it might, they framed it in a way where it's like, okay, this has to be real. It isn't like, oh, these are just crazy people that they have to worry about.
I suppose, like, I think he had points, it kind of seemed like he was trying to do some kind of, like, I don't know, like QAnon allegory kind of thing. Like, this idea that, like, people can buy into, like, something if they're in, like, an echo chamber and they see something enough times and they convince themselves that it's real or it's, right or whatever, they are capable of, like, acting on it. And, like, it kind of seemed to be trying to go in that direction to a certain extent, but then it was just really kind of, I don't know, wishy-washy on how much it was going to go in that direction versus, like, just the straightforward, this is actually happening and what are you going to do about it kind of situation.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because that one of the things I did like with the movie is that, like, the 4 people who come in who are, like, I think I guess they're the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And it's interesting because they were kind of starting to second guess themselves at different points of, like, oh, because the newscast wasn't quite lining up with what they thought at first, and like, oh, is this true, or like Rupert Grint, his character has, like, a fake name, and so it's like they're kind of second guessing themselves, and I thought that was, like, an interesting aspect. But and here's the thing, it's always like, when I'm going to say this a lot in the course of this discussion here, but everything I can praise about this movie is, say, it's interesting, but
Yeah, there's so that's a good way to put it.
you know, it's and I feel like this is the kind of thing that, like, you know, you see with a lot of M. Night Shyamalan's movies, you know, over the past decade, because, like, you know, he had his amazing, illustrious start, and then he fell into some of the worst movies ever made.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, he's kind of, like, evened out into this thing where it's like his movies are either, like, you know, they're bad, but they have some cool parts to it, or it's like they're good, but they have some pretty glaring flaws. And
yeah, well, I think it's been interesting to that end. Like, you know, I will fully admit that, like, you know, I am a little less receptive, I guess, of these movies, just kind of in general. But, like, the last two movies have been kind of, in a weird way, like, they're solid. They're not like, I don't know, The Happening or Lady in the Water or The Avatar or whatever, but, like, they're not good, and they're both adapted. So it's not like it's not like a thing like, oh, well, Shyamalan's just run out of ideas or whatever. He's, like, taking these ideas, you know, this is from that Tremblay novel, and Oldest, based on, I think, a graphic novel by somebody. And so it's like, okay, well, you know, he's taking somebody else's ideas and running with it, and he's not running with them in a very, I don't know, for me, compelling direction. So it's just kind of, I don't know, it's an interesting juncture in his career in that regard.
yeah, it's like, I think it's, you know, it's because I feel like I'm a bit more receptive to them, which means that, to be frank, I can't really say they're good either, but I still like them. The difference is, like, you know, it's like, you know, with Old, it's like, yes, that movie, it was kind of a hot mess, but there was some stuff in there that I thought was really cool, and some moments it's like, oh, that's actually, like, I feel like I got something meaningful from that.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Yeah, I actually went to I did my research. No academic articles for this one. I just went to Wikipedia to see, like, the book and kind of like how the book goes. And the movie actually departed a lot from the book, which I thought was interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because, like, the general premise is the same. The characters are pretty much the same, but their fates go very differently. And also, like, the way that things work is different. So I actually watched this movie twice.
Sorry.
But yeah, so I saw this movie twice, and I saw the second time was after I looked through the summary of the book to kind of double check everything. So in the movie, what's interesting is that when I don't want to just call them the four, and so the gang, the apocalypse gang, when they arrive, and they start, like, killing each other, it's like, oh, we have unleashed this plague upon the world with our sacrifice. And then, you know, you see it on the TV, which by the way, like, M. Night Shyamalan didn't do himself any favors by putting his, like, little CGI disasters next to actual like stock footage of real disasters.
That was really weird.
But yeah, so what was interesting is that apparently in the book, when they start killing each other, their sacrifice delays the apocalypse instead. So that was a big difference between the book and the film. And also, like, the film actually has an opposite ending to the book. So, like, you know how there's a part in the movie, did we do a spoiler warning? Let's
just do spoilers.
Yeah, it's like it's I mean, you kind of see most of the movie anyways. Like, this isn't really a movie where, you know, you really spoil. There's, like, big spoiler stuff anyways, whatever. But, you know, in the movie, there's this part in, like, kind of like the second or third act where, you know, the family, they kind of make their move, you know, like, Andrew goes for the gun in the car. Eric tries to like fight off Dave Bautista,
Mm-hmm.
like all that stuff, right? In the book, that kerfuffle actually ends up getting the daughter killed.
Okay.
And then the book also ends with, where it's like it's down to like Wire. It's the last two, and almost said Dave, Eric and Andrew. They actually decide not to sacrifice themselves, and so they just let the apocalypse happen. And so the fact so it's an opposite ending to this movie where they do decide to sacrifice one of themselves in the end, and they save the world. So it was kind of interesting to see that ending was changed.
That's... I know it's... I mean, Wiki is, like, the driest. You'll just get a plot summary, but, like, was there any kind of, like, I don't know, flavor as to, like, the characterization or how the characters were handled kind of in their internal, like, I don't know, worldviews or whatnot at all?
I'm not sure. Again, the summary didn't really provide that much. Didn't provide that much information to it. I'd be interested in trying to read it, but it is like a longer. I guess it's not like that long, but it's like 260 pages. I want to say it was. So it's like a book-sized book.
Fair. I'm just asking just because, and we can obviously get into it and whatnot, but like that kind of like handling of the characters like was kind of one of the like weakest aspects for me as far as just like you have Eric and Andrew, and it's just a very like static sort of like characterization throughout the entire thing up until like right at the last second. Then like just like not so much like a character arc is like just a cliff they fall off, and then the final like 5-10 minutes of the film happen. And so it's just kind of like, I don't know, it felt very static in that regard.
Yeah, I really agree with her, because there's going into like the third, like I think it's in the middle of the third act is when we get a backstory of like Eric and Andrew, they're out at bar. Andrew like gets attacked, and now that prompts him to be like, oh, a little bit more, like it hardens him a bit, like we see him go to like kickboxing class, he buys a gun, things like that.
Mm-hmm. And it's seemingly pointing the gun directly at the person selling it to him, the way the shot screamed. That was wild.
And I was like, the gun safety class comes after that.
That's very American.
And it's like I was watching, it's like, oh, this is like an interesting bit of characterization. I was like, and also like, because one of the things Shyamalan is infamous for is like his dialogue, and it's like there's like, hey, there's a good scene that's kind of characterizing him without words needing to be said. It's pretty cool. I wish we got this an hour ago.
Yeah, because like Eric or Andrew is such like, I don't know, it's almost like an understatement to call him like a misanthrope, because he like is literally willing to let everyone die for like the entirety of the film up until the very last second. And like you get this backstory and whatnot, and like you're saying, it's kind of weirdly placed in the movie, but it's also like, I don't know, it's just like the way it was set up just didn't feel like, it's a traumatizing experience obviously, but like just within like movie logic or whatever, it just felt like too little too late to a certain extent for me. Like, if I'm gonna have like someone be like literally like, fuck everyone, they don't matter, like I need something like operatic to happen.
Yeah, I mean, at least he got something. I feel like Eric didn't really get much of anything at all. He didn't even get that much. Because what's interesting is that these flashbacks, like the family history and everything, are kind of peppered through the movie, as like ways to kind of like trying to glue different scenes together. That was something I noticed. Like the editing in this movie, especially the second time around, is like it kind of feels like scenes will just kind of be like, okay, this scene starts now, and then this scene will start now. There's not a very dynamic movement between them. It felt like it was just like, okay.
Yeah, and like the way they're intercutting kind of like what got them to the cabin in the relationship to like these events that are unfolding, it felt more like, you know, obviously like the idea of this sort of back and forth story structure is like common and whatnot, but like it felt like more like he'd introduced a wrinkle or an idea and was like, oh crap, I need to like explain this or create precedent for it, and then he gives you the backdrop rather than like something unfolding in like a little bit more organic way, you know? Even down to like the little like details, like you mentioned, the plague like was apparently has been a thing for a while, but we have heard nothing about it, right? And then he's like, oh, I've heard about it for 4 months. You're like, wait, what even is this? Like it just felt contrived in that regard. Or like all of a sudden he's like a human rights lawyer or something like that, and you're just like, it's just the way that these things are being introduced was jarring to me.
You know, and I feel like what might have made it stronger is if they had kind of taken these elements of like their family and everything and put them, like, condense them at the beginning. And because there isn't like that terribly much of the screen time, I think. Like, you know, we have like it'd be like 5 or 7 minutes of them, you know, at the bar, you know, go through that. And then you have like, oh, you know, the meeting with the parents that goes poorly. You know, but then you have them, you know, with Wen, you know, as an infant, you know, at the hospital, and then you have them coming to the cabin. That's like, again, that's like 5 or 7 minutes, so it's not like that. It won't be like a super long prologue or anything. You know, you get through that, and it's like, okay, these people, they've gone through some shit. You know, they have, you know, this guy, Andrew's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder, but they are happy now. They're on a nice family vacation. Look at them, having a good time. Oh no, Dave Bautista shows up with his murder gang.
Yeah, that would like maybe kind of ground it a little bit, or like help to soften, because like when you introduce like the energy that like Andrew is operating at like on a base level, you're like, what is this dude's damage? And like eventually you find it out or whatever, but it's hard to, I don't know, side with somebody without context when when they're acting in a certain way.
Right, you know, like or even, you know, if you want to have this be like, oh, it's a character telling another character this, instead of it just being like a flashback shown to us, the audience, and then we can have like a little bit more connection with stuff. Like, I don't know, just like something. Because again, like I feel like these are components you could use to make, like you could use these components and arrange them into a narrative that's stronger than it currently is. Because when Dave Bautista, there's a moment where he's like, I know why you were chosen for this. It's because the power of your family's love for each other. And I was like, really? Like, okay. Really? Is that what we're getting here?
I mean, they did sing Boogie Shoes once, so that's pretty compelling.
Yeah, it's like, I will say, because like the very last scene of the movie is like, you know, Dad and Wen are in a car together, and you know, it's like, you know, they see like the apocalypse has stopped and everything, and there's this scene, there's one shot where like they start the car, the radio is playing, and it's playing Boogie Shoes, which reminds them of like, you know, no one who died, and Dad turns it off, and when turns it on, plays for a moment, you know, kind of watching him, turns it off, and then Dad turns it back on again. And I was like, that's a good scene, because like it's this wordless exchange between them of like, you know, it hurts for him, but she's like, hey, you know, let's keep going forward. We can remember him, keep him in our hearts. All this is said without dialogue, and it's like it's this moment. It's like like there's moments where this movie is is good, even great. But
yeah, no, like I think that it's a good character beat.
Yeah, like another thing that was, I felt like had some big missed potential was this whole thing with these people being the Four Horsemen, and this is something that I think also is not in the book. Because when I looked through it, I didn't see anything but like it was the Four Horsemen, and again, it's like they're trying to sacrifice themselves to delay the apocalypse, while in the movie, they sacrifice themselves to trigger the different stages of the apocalypse.
Yeah, that was like one of the weirdest things, like, and I didn't know if at the time if it was like a phrasing thing or what, because it was like, wait, if you guys like don't kill yourselves, it won't continue. Like, why are we even in this situation to start with?
Right, and I was like, they were just, it was the visions. That they were crazy, okay? They were crazy, so it makes sense. Yeah, you know, it's just they were wackos who scribbled on, you know, their the students' homework, these horrible, you know, visions of the future.
I think you should make it make sense, the tagline for the movie.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, honestly, I think there'd be a tagline for like most of his movies nowadays. Let's be real. But it was, and because watching it the second time, this idea, it got better, and it also got weaker in different aspects. So, you know, the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, you know, according to like biblical stuff, you have war, pestilence, famine, death. And I thought it was interesting because you have, you know, this guy who's like, you know, Reynard's like, you know, the angry, wrathful guy. You have a cook that kind of lines up with famine. You have a nurse that lines up with pestilence. And then death, he is just kind of like a free space. So you could just have anybody be death.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting to see it line up. But then the movie's like, and it also lines up with the four aspects of humanity, you know, wrath, nurturing, healing, and guidance. And I was like, when are these the four aspects of humanity?
That was a little bit of a Mad Libs moment. I was kind of thrown for a loop.
Yeah, I was like, because it's like, I feel like the idea of these people, you know, being, you know, it could even be, you know, they're unwitting vessels for it. Like, you know, maybe, you know, because I feel like it's kind of implied, especially in the first, like when Rupert Grint, the first one to be sacrificed, goes. You kind of get this idea of like, you know, after it's done, everyone, it's like they come out of a trance and they're like, oh my god, like, holy shit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I feel like, if, you know.
No, go on.
Go ahead. No, that was just kind of me. That was the end of my thought. My mouth tends to keep going even when my thought is finished.
Join the club.
Yeah. But yeah, you know, it's like, so I like this idea, but then you have to staple onto that as well, like, oh, it's the four aspects of humanity, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
No, it that part felt really kind of tacked on. Like, I would say just go with the, you know, the biblical analogy. I was trying to see if, like, I know they were, like, depicted as having, like, different colored horses that they're on, so I was trying to figure out, like, if they did have, like, color schemes that matched or something, just as a little Easter egg, but then I just kind of gave up.
Yeah. Actually, I kept an eye out for that, because, like, and they do it for, like, one of them, because, like, Redmond is wearing red.
Mm-hmm.
They got the obvious one, but the thing also is that, so that biblical allegory doesn't really fit in too well, because, you know, because I guess it's like the nurse kind of lines up with the pestilence, right?
Sure.
Except her death doesn't trigger the virus. It's the cook who triggers the virus.
Well, I've known a couple cooks that trigger viruses, but
yeah. And then the nurse her death triggers the airplane downings.
Yeah, it does seem a little kind of, I don't know, helter-skelter as far as kind of lining up your allegories and, you know, I don't know, making things cogent makes sense, but the dude also did Lady in the Water, so
Oh my god, I actually forgot about the existence of that movie, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just like, I have very intense and conflicted feelings about M. Night Shyamalan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, because it's like, oh, like, because on the one hand, you know, it's like, you have people who are like, oh, he made The Last Airbender, therefore he can never make anything ever again. And it's like, no, he's made stuff since then. Some of it's been decent. But at the same time, you look at Lady in the Water, and he has like this, he gives himself this like messiah complex in the movie, and it's like, oh, I don't want to defend your movies anymore.
I will say this is the greatest M. Night Shyamalan cameo in recent memory.
Oh,
like, just
yes.
fry some chicken, dude. Like, I don't need to see you be like the storyteller. I don't need to see you take pictures of people on the beach. I just want to see you in an infomercial selling like air fryers or something.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I just need like M. Night Shyamalan's face, and then with the meme text, clearly you don't own an air fryer.
There we go. I think you fixed the movie.
What can I say? I'm a genius.
Oh, Hollywood's gonna come a-calling.
Another thing that felt weird with this movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I was watching this, and then I realized, so apparently this is rated R, right?
Yeah, well, they dropped the F-bomb like it's candy. So
Yeah, like there's a lot of F-bombs, but at the same time it felt weirdly averse to violence.
yeah, it kind of did the whole like kind of cut away from the very kind of like poetic, like the camera's like gonna tilt out or it's gonna like kind of like push away and well, look at the wall now or something like that. It was very kind of like suggestive, which I was fine with. Like, I don't know what the impact would have been with a gorier film.
Right, you know, it's like, it was, you know, because, like, obviously I'm not like, oh, like, we need to see everything, like, you know, there's, you know, like, you know, at the end, when Dave Bautista, you know, is like, he's the last sacrifice, and he kind of cuts his own throat, and camera, like, zooms in more on his chest, so we don't see the cut being made, but we see, like, the blood kind of falling down, like, that was, like, okay, that was kind of, like, an interesting kind of way to do that, but,
you know, or you get, like, Rupert Grint in the, like, I don't know, Funny Games hood, and then like it kind of like the blood kind of goes through or whatever, and so it's a very like, it looks like a Rorschach test or something, I don't know. But yeah, again, very like suggestive. There's never like actual penetration or anything like that.
Right, you know, I was like, and I thought that was, you know, that was kind of an interesting choice that was being made there. Oh, also we have to, I feel like we should also talk about, everyone's favorite parts of every M. Night Shyamalan movie, the dialogue.
No. Well, I mean, he did give us the gift of, what was it? His name is Charlie and he likes pancakes. And you're like, this is delivered perfectly. It is the greatest laugh line in, I don't know, cinema history. Perfect. More of that, please.
I mean, I don't think you understand. This is actually a very deep line because this is being delivered by Famine. I think this is supposed to be Famine. So, like, you know, her son liking pancakes is like a metaphor for something.
There we go. Something.
But that said, I did also jot down this line. I also love the like after they have Ben tied up, and I'm pretty sure this is after. Yeah, this is after like almost call him just like Rupert. Rupert Grint has been killed, and like like Andrew yells at Dave Bautista and he says, "The premise of your scam is flawed."
There's some doozies.
Yeah, it's like, I also loved how, like, you know, because you also have the you know, like after they tie everyone up, then everybody introduces themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what is your name and occupation? And like Redmond, like I think you literally, like, you told me, like, oh, you can't wait for that, like, before you went to see a movie, and then it actually happened.
Yeah, I was really I was not happy. I was like, you found a way to get into work into this plot. It's more subtle, I guess. Like, he doesn't literally... Well, no, he does, I think. Never mind, it's not more subtle.
There's at least, like, you know, I guess, like, it kind of sort of makes sense, because, like, oh, he's a second grade teacher, and this is probably how he's, like, how he starts every school year. He's like, you know, little Timmy, give us your name and occupation.
Yeah. I think that was maybe the most, like, I'm not going to call it clever, but, like, the best way to work around the fact that, like, all the Shyamalan scripts kind of have this tendency, especially recently, to kind of feel a little, like, AI, like, generated or something, is, like, the, like, especially the opening dialogue between Leonard and Wen is very kind of, like, operating on that level, but then you're like, oh, well, I guess if he's a teacher, then he's used to, like, kind of speaking to children on their level or something, except this is like an M. Night Shyamalan child, so that's going to sound very specific, but...
Yeah, it was funny because, like, there's a couple of times the movie almost felt, like, self-aware, because, like, during this whole sequence, like, Rupert, like, he also, like, makes fun of it. He's like, oh, you know, like, yeah, like, I'm Redmond, you know, I like long walks on the beach. And then he just kind of falls into the trope as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then even kind of also, like, to this extent, like, I don't know about you, but it felt to me like the handling of the couple kind of like a movie from, like, I don't know, 10 years ago. Like, insofar as, like, the nuance of its handling, like, a queer couple was very kind of, like, basic and, like, wanting brownie points for being, like, we exist, kind of, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, I feel like the dialogues kind of move, like, beyond that to a certain extent, where it's just kind of like, okay, well, yeah, but do you want to do something more with this? And apparently the answer was no, but...
I mean, honestly, like, you know, kind of seeing how, you know, how little, like, you know, other studios are trying to squeeze from this. Like, they're like, hey, look, there's a gay couple in the background shot of this scene for, you know, 3.4 seconds. You know, churn out articles about that. You know, I guess it's, like, the fact that, like, you know, they, you know, it's like, you know, that there are actual characters in this movie. I mean... within the realms of M. Night Shyamalan. But, as I know, it's like, I thought that, I mean, I wasn't, like offended by it or anything.
No,
like,
I mean, it's not offensive, it's just kind of bland.
Unfortunately, it comes with the filmmaker. Let's be real.
Yeah. Well, which is fascinating, because when I first, like, got wind of this or whatever, and I was like, okay, here we go again, I was intrigued, shall I say, by the fact that he was, I think for the first time, taking on, like, co-writers. And so I looked them up, and the other two credited screenwriters as Steve Desmond and Michael Sherman. Their resumes, they seem to be, like, at least to a certain extent, like a duo, because they co-wrote and one of them directed a short in 2015 called Monsters, and that's kind of the full extent of their, or not the full extent, but, like, it looks like that's the biggest splash they made or whatnot. So it's just kind of interesting, like, okay, why bring these two on, and what effect does it have on the script as compared to Shyamalan solo writing this whole thing?
Yeah, because and I feel like, there's different parts and he's like, okay, we know who wrote that line. We know who wrote, his name is Charlie, he likes pancakes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so it would be kind of interesting to kind of be like, oh, who, kind of like, which parts of the collaboration they did, because like, there's parts where it's like, oh, like they're talking like normal people. I will say, like, what, because, Shyamalan tends to have an effect on his actors as well.
I think there's only a certain way you can, like, deliver his lines.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if it's possible to do anything other than this sort of, boop, 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 boop. And you're like, okay, here we go.
Yeah, there's only so many ways you can deliver. The premise of your scam is flawed. But that said, I feel like, kind of given that, I feel like most of the people in this movie like did a pretty good job. Like, like Dave Bautista, I thought he did like, I thought he was pretty good in a lot of different scenes. Like, he has this good like this intensity to him. I think it might just be like his voice. He just has this very like, I don't know. His voice is very both like, I don't know, like ominous, but also calming.
Yeah, he's got like this interesting divide in the way he was kind of handling the characters, being, I don't know, not nurturing, but like in that neighborhood, but also he's got this very specific goal or like mission in mind, and he's not gonna like let anything deter him from that. So there's also that kind of underlying energy to it.
Yeah, it's like, I think like probably my favorite part of the movie was this one where as like when like the next last plague has been unleashed, and like they start, you see like the news coverage, and then he turns around and he starts just reciting what the woman is on the TV is about to say. Mm-hmm. And it's like the final proof that what he's saying is real. And I was like, that he had a pretty good screen presence. I'm like, you compare it to like other WWE people turned actors, you got Dwayne Johnson, who's still, trying to convince people that Black Adam was a success.
Yeah.
John Cena, who's like, he knows how to pick roles that fit his strengths, whereas like he's not, it's like, he's in movies like Bumblebee, for example. It's,
yeah, he's operating on more of like a comedy angle, I guess, instead of like blockers and all that kind of stuff.
Right,
And
I think
it's the James Gunn Suicide Squad.
Yes, that's right. Suicide Squad. I forgot he was in. Yes. And he's really good in that. Like, I actually really enjoyed the way he brought that role to life.
Yeah.
But I think like Dave Bautista actually has like a legitimate like acting career.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see what he does. Like, I think he's got a decent screen presence. I think if anything, Glass Onion did it for me more in terms of like, he's good, and he's good at like line delivery, but a lot of his characters have been operating on this kind of like stoic level, I guess, for lack of a better term, and like this felt kind of like a variation on that theme. So like, I'm interested in what he does moving forward, but I'm hoping for a little bit more of like variation, I guess.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, like I think I have a feeling this is going to open some more doors for him. Sure. I feel like, because like this movie is the one that like M. Night Shyamalan is the one who finally unseated Avatar 2 at the #1 box office spot.
Really?
Yeah. This is the movie.
Oh, I guess James Cameron's sweating in his boots. Shaking in his boots. I don't know what the hell that was. Mixed metaphor.
I mean, why not both? Why not both?
Why not both?
Okay, so here's another thing in my notes.
Yeah.
And I think this is something, it kind of ties back to the idea of like this missed potential. The grasshoppers. Because I feel like this
locusts,
was
it's a biblical plague. It was like the first shot. Like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. Is you know, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, because I was just like, what is this supposed to be? Because I thought it was supposed to be like this like big motif, because like, you know, opens with when like the opening shot of the movie is a grasshopper. And then she's like putting them in the jar and everything, and then she meets Dave Bautista, and then as everybody's like, you know, captured and tied up, cuts to another shot of the jar outside, with the cabin in the background, and then there's another shot later in the movie of the grasshoppers on the window.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, this probably means something. Is this like they're trapped? This idea of like being trapped. But if that's just it, then like I feel like that's a little, I don't know.
Well, and then it gets muddied
deeper?
because like Wen is the one doing it for the most part. So it's like, is she God? Is she, like, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I was like, in rewatching it, so I was like, okay, like this the entire thing, and she's just like, oh, you know, I'm going to just, you know, put you in here, you know, don't scare everybody else. I'm gonna learn about you. And I was watching, I was like, I don't see this fitting into the rest of the plot. I feel like this should be more important because of the way like this is built, like the first half of the movie, and then the grasshoppers just don't appear anymore.
Yeah, they're just kind of done. I mean, maybe there's a tiny tsunami in the bottle or something. I don't know. I mean, but I think that does kind of get to the crux of it, which is like there's a lot of ideas that he's throwing at the wall, but they're not quite sticking, or at least in the impactful way that, like, I don't know, one would hope they would.
Yeah, you know, it's just like it's like he needed to put them in his special chicken fryer a little longer to cook more.
There we go. Just gotta air fry it.
No, that's what the symbolic importance is of the cameo. It's him trying to cook the movie.
Just cry for
I don't know
help.
where I don't know where I'm going with this, but
I don't know if
this
you
is
knew either, so it's totally fair.
I think like my last major point here, and I will kind of end on like a positive note, because like, you know, I feel like, you know, we, you know, making fun of him, you know, making fun of M. Night Shyamalan a lot, and you know, part of that is because, you know, he has this big ego, and so it's kind of, you know, it's like, oh, you kind of want to take him down a peg. But I will say is that he will move the camera in, I'll say it again, interesting ways. Interesting ways.
Mm-hmm.
And like different things, and it's like, you know, in the initial like home invasion, you know, there's this dynamic fighting shot where like Rupert Grint is getting beat up, and like the camera is like behind his head, and it's like swinging back and forth as he's being, you know, beat up. There was this one really good shot actually that I liked, was let's see, it was after the Charlie Pancake lady, after she sacrificed, and the camera goes like, you know, Dave Bautista is like carrying her to another room, like, oh, we don't want to disturb everyone here, we'll carry her into another room. And we see him, we see the nurse, and they're like, oh, they're like reacting to this, like, oh god. And then we see Andrew, he's also in this shot, like off to the left, and then he reacts like towards the end of the shot. And I thought it was interesting, kind of showing, you know, three different characters, like how they're reacting to the situation. And it's like, that's a really good way to kind of frame everything. There's parts of this that look really good, and then there's also parts where, you know, you have the super intense close-ups. You see it in the trailer, the intense, very close up, staring into the camera.
Yeah, very like, you're like, oh, okay, hello, pores. Here we go. Yeah, I think you got like a good point. Like, it's like when you're intentionally limiting your like your location and keeping things very intimate and very sort of stripped down. If you're telling this in like film format rather than making it like a play or something, you have to create like interest or tension or whatever through like composition and stuff. And like the one shot you're describing where there's like multiple planes of action is like, okay, like there's something going on here. You're telling me a story beat in how like we're seeing these different things unfolding simultaneously, or like kind of interesting little like technical shots, like the he only does it like once, but like when Bautista goes to like land the killing blow, and there's that kind of disorienting, like, I don't know how to describe it, like 90 degrees sort of like tilt that happens, that we're following the blade pitchwork thing as it goes down. It's kind of like, whoa, that's interesting. Like, this kind of came out of nowhere, but so there's stuff to work with for sure. And then some faces.
Yeah, it's like, that was a really good shot, because that's also in the trailer. Yeah, and that's what kind of brings me, like, that's what keeps me coming back to M. Night Shyamalan's movies. Again, like, much as I make fun of him, I knew this was the movie I wanted to kind of start things off with, because he makes choices. Sometimes those choices pay off really well. Sometimes you're left wondering what the heck is going on here.
Mm-hmm.
But, in the grand scheme of, where we have a lot of major studios that just turn out very safe, very basic kind of movies, like, at least now I'm going to get something unlike anything else you can get from any other person when you go into an M. Night Shyamalan movie. For better and for worse.
Yeah, that's the way to put it.
Well, would you... we'll just kind of, steal this directly from Red Letter Media. Would you recommend Knock at the Cabin?
If I didn't have to pay for it?
I think, like, overall, I would say it would depend on what you're willing to tolerate. I feel like if you're just looking for like a basic kind of like, and I wouldn't say basic, but like, like if you're willing to put up with some weirdness, some quirkiness for things not always adding up, this movie has a lot of interesting ideas, things that will, things that might linger with you. If you're like, oh, I don't like M. Night Shyamalan's movies, you're probably not going to like this one. But if you are willing to, if you are one to, put up with that quirkiness, to put up with that strangeness, to put up with things that might be a little bit lopsided, a little bit incomplete, there's my glowing recommendation for you.
One for the ages.
All right. Well, hey. Yeah, thank you so much for joining me, Reynard, and thank you, all of you, for joining us for our debut episode. If you want, you can follow Reynard again. He's at if you want, you can follow Reynard. He's at sloshcinema at tumblr.com. And me, I'm Daniel Goldhorn here on YouTube. I'll put links to both of our respective social medias in the description. And do you have anything else you want to say before we go?
The Village is M. Night Shyamalan's best movie. I don't know.
You know what? I think that's a good recommendation. All right. Good night, everybody.
Night.